Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. We're going to talk about village psychology and how to take care of the children. And this thought came to my mind because of something I saw. I saw a little video appeared on Friday, which went a long way. I saw it on regular news. They put it up, and there's been a lot of talk about it. But it elicited such sadness for me because it had to do with a 2-year-old that was on an airplane, and she and her family were being thrown off because her mask wouldn't stay on her face, and she didn't want it. She just was annoyed by the whole thing. And so she was crying and avoiding it, and it got to the point where she couldn't be handled the way the administrators, the airline people, wanted. And although they had already flown 4 times with this airline, they're a frequent flyer with this airline, this was the first time out of 5 that this happened. And also, she's only 2 years old, and she was the problem. And the regulations, if you look at WHO's regulations, that children under 5 don't have to wear a mask. And there's good reason why they would rule that way, because the disease is not deadly. Very, very, very few people, end up getting it. So children like this are pretty safe. But this was catastrophic, and because it went on social media, regular TV, I saw it on regular TV and written up in all the newspapers. It was a catching issue, and I got to thinking, the village, which is represented by government edicts and social welfare programs, it is said that it takes a village really to raise children. And in that implication, when the people who support the village approach to raising children, what they literally say is they either ignore or downplay the parents. Of course, we that come from a more conservative religious background, we think the family is pretty important and pretty responsible, and that we get a little bit nervous about outsiders coming in, especially if it has the authority of government and the mandates and the dictates. So, Chris, I imagine you saw this little video, and I found a great deal of sadness when I had to watch a small child crying, and she was a beautiful little child being tossed off the airplane, and their Christmas trip was canceled.
Yes, it was sad to see on many levels. And, when it comes to this village stuff, the principles are this. Authoritarians are always a small group. I mean, that's the goal. You have a small group that rules over everyone. But the problem that they face is if one person or a small group openly dictates everything, people will resist, and they will know who to resist against. So they create smoke screens to hide behind. It takes a village is one of them. And we're all in this together. We heard that a lot this year. And their favorite is, we are the government. Well, that would mean, if you take this year, that 50 million people threw themselves out of work, and that half of the small businesses out there that are closing for good did this to themselves. The reality is there's a very big distinction between we and the government. We did not do this to ourselves. But that's the way authoritarians work. They create smoke screens to hide behind so that they can make the dictates, and everybody follows along and believes in, the fairy tale.
Under these circumstances, I see the village represents the authoritarians and the interventionists and the people telling us how to live, and that falls into the category of socialism and fascism and all the things that are opposite of liberty. And this is something that people don't realize, but what we're undergoing this. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in this past year, especially with where does medical care come in on this? Isn't it absolutely necessary that the government be 100% in charge on medical care? They're the authoritarians and they know what is best, and that's why some of these rules get laid down. But then again, some of the rules get varied. As the international organizations, the authoritarians, and the final word, or is our national government, or is our state government, or our local government? Because all of a sudden, medical care and health, especially health, because I see health is what we should be talking about, even when we're talking about coronavirus. Instead of only talking about, who should wear a mask and what happens to people who won't wear a mask, this sort of thing, we should be talking about who's in charge of health. And as far as I'm concerned, it should be the individual and the families, and they should be determining that, and nobody should be forced. And if there are dangers, they have to be pointed out, and the people have to make the decisions. But property ownership and private property can solve most of these problems. But once the concept gets embedded, like the principle of the village is in charge, all of a sudden the village becomes in charge of medical care in total, then also education in total, so they can be mixed. Under the circumstances that we've been living with recently, is the medical care seems to be very, very confused, especially when they find out that small children aren't a threat to themselves or to anybody else. And then when you look at what has happened, this approach that we witnessed on the airplane, when that's applied to school kids, we're ending up in people, whether they come from left or right or pro-mask or anti-mask, most people are saying right now, this school system is messed up. And those who are even, in opposition to a lot of what we say, are saying, get the schools open, except maybe for the unions. The teachers' unions are the strongest opponents to this. But it's something that gets out of control, and the assumption is that they know what's best. But it's back to the overall principle of liberty and private property and personal decisions and personal responsibilities that make all the difference. But right now, we see a vivid example of the village. And all I could think of when I saw those very sad pictures of this little girl being tossed off is, the village is here, they're in charge. The village authorities are here to tell everybody what to do because the world is coming to an end unless we follow these rules. Yeah, I thought the in charge of the village is WHO, the World Health Organization. Don't they know what's best? And they said, little kids don't need them. And of course, we recite from so many medical authorities that say the same thing. Little kids don't need these masks. And just think of the tragedy that they went through there, not even obeying the rules of the village. It looks to me like maybe it isn't the leadership of the village, maybe it's the principle of the village. You can't find somebody that is all of a sudden going to be a good village leader and know exactly what's right for everybody in the village.
Yes, and many people in the village, they have jobs that are putting them in a very tough situation. People that look to rule over others, one common thing that they have is unimaginable amounts of money. Now, there's a lot of normal people, too, that have lots of money, and they don't look to rule over others. But those who rule tend to always have tons of money. But money is only one thing. They also live like the rest of us in a world where resources are scarce, no matter how much money you have. So if they want to implement their authoritarianism, they need help from others. Now, obviously, they get it from the media. Everybody knows that now. But they also get help from corporations. But it's best to them when people themselves help the authoritarians by policing other people. When you see, the regular guy on the street acting like a little dictator, he's pretty much an unpaid employee of an authoritarian. That's what's happening. And there's a lot of people in their jobs that are put in tough positions. Do they do their job, or do they appeal to their common sense, their humanity? And, the best that I can say is, someday your job will be gone, but you have to live with yourself forever. So it's best not to be an unpaid employee for people that do not have your best interests in mind.
In this past year, it's been a very good example. Should be a good lesson, but I'm not sure that everybody's been learning the same lesson that I had tried to emphasize. And that is the village attitude of being able to instruct and tell people what to do really is made very manifest about when they decide that lockdown is the best thing. Keep people at home. Some days you stay inside, some days you go outside, and oh yes, and then we lock down one building but not the next, and it just goes on and on. It's so imperfect. And this to me indicates that either they're very, very confused about what they're doing, or they had an ulterior motives to see the chaos that is created. Because right now, people are talking about a lost generation. And it seems like it's not just those who call themselves conservatives or liberals. They're starting to recognize there's something going on with the kids. And this is going to be a whole generation. And this is going to be a small minority that will really survive these conditions. And so often we hear now, not on internet and not on our program, but on regular television, get the schools open, and sort of bump the village away. The village has had their chance, and look at what it's been led to. It's a real mess. And, another one is a personal peeve that I have, because I think it's so beneficial for young people, all the girls and the boys and the men and the women, to participate in athletic events. And when you think about, the biggest thing last year probably in the news, and I don't watch the athletic events very carefully, but it's the standing or kneeling for the national anthem. That is a big deal. And then the lockdown. And then all of a sudden, the grand experience of going to a baseball game or a football game and really enjoying it, it's not there. And I would say that's another example of how this collective approach to things, how the village doesn't have the answer. The village leaders don't have the answer. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody can create a perfect society. But the best chance we have for having more peace and prosperity and a sense of satisfaction is that the individual have the most amount of responsibility. Now, if it's a smaller unit, then we deal about the individual and we deal with our families. We don't all of a sudden defer, parents aren't the important issue. It's the village. It's these programs. It's these things, the rules that the government gives it. Free education, free medical care. And look at the results of it. It looks like this free medicine and advices looks like it's going to destroy a generation. And free education, the educational system has been deteriorating for a long time, and now it's gotten much worse. It was just the uniformly bad professors in our universities that were causing a lot of harm. Now it's universal, starting from first grade on up, that things are so distorted that they're undermining the opportunities for so many young people. I just find that a really sad situation, especially when I have a firm conviction that it was preventable if we would have just understood what liberty is all about and how that is the best way to approach society.
That's correct, Dr. Paul. I will finish up looking at the big picture with this. America was a place that people from all over the world ran to, not to join a village. They were running from these people. They were running from the socialists, from authoritarians, to come to America to be free. And look what we have now in America. Today, we have, once again, socialists chasing Americans away, whether it be from a state in California, whether it be from a city like New York City. These people are fleeing the socialists and authoritarians so that they could be free somewhere else, somewhere like a Florida or a Texas or a South Dakota. So it's the same principle, the same thing is happening. The only difference is the scale. Instead of people leaving countries for here, we're leaving cities and states. Same thing, to go try freedom or to go find freedom. And it seems like authoritarian socialists, they never learn. They're trying to abolish freedom. It's equivalent to like taking your fist and squeezing water. I mean, what happens when you do that? You open your hand and the water's gone. You're empty-handed. You can't do it. But they never seem to learn. They always are just they think they could always do it better. The former socialists did it wrong. Well, the whole idea is wrong. The people that came here for freedom, that's what they wanted. That's what America was all about. And now we have to climb out of this giant hole that was created by these failed ideas.
Very good. You know, there's a few things going on right now. Matter of fact, as we speak, the village has decided that almost everybody has to go out and get a vaccine. And a lot of people have been frightened and they see this as a danger and they're very anxious to have it. But it's not universal. As far as I'm concerned, this is an example of when you don't want an authoritarian village leader to make the decision, because more stories are popping up now that there are complications. Anybody who's had allergies aren't supposed to take this, and people who have been discriminated against by the false use of medications, they're getting excused because they don't want to be put in a category as guinea pigs. So there's going to be a lot of these exceptions, but the truth is under medical conditions like this, there can be a lot of complication. Now, just superficially, I think the British are probably a little more tolerant than the American people to this universal authoritarian approach to medicine. But I'm not sure that's true at all, because I think we've sort of lost our way. There's a growing number of people who are getting more nervous about the approach that we're following right now. But in Great Britain, they've just done, you know, since everybody's getting ready for the vaccine, they think about 40% of the British people don't want the vaccine, which is, you know, it's a mixed thing. Maybe somebody that should have it won't get it, and this sort of thing. But it shouldn't be these dictates. And this is showing that the people are rejecting this whole idea that everybody has to have this vaccine, and this is the way it should be. So there's a lot of information out there, and this whole idea that science has settled it, that is a lot of nonsense. Let me tell you, science usually just opens a lot of more room for more questions. There's so many things throughout history, medically speaking and other science, that was so false, they were completely wrong on the issue. So if people decide that yesterday the science settled this and don't ever ask another question, be leery, because they probably don't know the whole story. And that's just a strong argument for a free society, for people to think about these things and make their own decisions and reject this idea of the village authoritarians that are everywhere, you know, and they're very powerful and they're very influential, because the tool that they use most is fear and get people very, very scared. And there's a lot of that going on now, because people just don't know what to believe. Half the people believe this, the other half of this, and it just goes on, and most of that is stirred up unnecessarily. Just like the complications of lockdown is something that didn't have to happen. The quarantines and all this could have been taken care of in a much different fashion, but this lockdown and, you know, punishing one group and not punishing the other group, and people getting angry. But some people are of a firm conviction that's what we need. We need a little bit of chaos if we're going to have, you know, a new society where the rules are changed, and we want the village in charge. We have to get people scared enough to bow to the village. That is what I fear the most, and I think people should, you know, work as hard as possible to understand how liberty can answer the difficult questions, whether it's health or education, happiness or whatever, rather than depending on a few authoritarians. So if you're looking for peace and prosperity, I think that's the approach we should all follow. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.